Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends from across the United States, welcome. Today we present an extraordinary, fact-packed historical drama titled The History of Architecture in New York City, a 7th-century epic written in stone, steel, and sky. This is no dry lecture or textbook chapter. This is a living, breathing, cinematic-style narrated tale told through the unbroken bloodline of one remarkable American family, the Harpers, who helped raise New York from a muddy Dutch trading post in 1626 to the cloud-piercing metropolis we know today. Every building, every fire, every race to the heavens, every act of courage and creativity is rooted in real events, real architects, real engineering breakthroughs, and real human drama that shaped the greatest skyline on Earth. So dim the lights, lean back, and let the story begin. Narrator, warm, cinematic voice with the faint sound of waves lapping against a 17th century hull. Imagine this. You stand at the edge of Brooklyn Bridge at dawn. The first light of a new day paints the Manhattan skyline in molten gold and gleaming steel. The Chrysler Building's spire flashes like a crown forged in the dreams of giants. The Empire State Building pierces the clouds as if daring the gods themselves. Far downtown, One World Trade Center rises like a defiant phoenix from sacred ground. This is not merely concrete and glass. This is a living epic, 700 years in the telling, written in brick, stone, timber, cast iron, steel, and shimmering glass by the hands of dreamers, immigrants, tycoons, visionaries, and ordinary men and women who refuse to be ordinary. And the most astonishing part? It all began with a handful of Dutch settlers who never imagined the city they were about to birth would one day touch the heavens. In the spring of 1626, Peter van Rensselaer stepped off a creaking ship onto the muddy shore of Mannahatta, the rocky island the Lenape people called the place of many hills. He was a master carpenter sent by the Dutch West India Company to transform a tiny trading post called New Amsterdam into something permanent. The air smelled of salt marsh and pine resin. Peter's very first act was to raise a simple gabled house of timber and imported Dutch brick, its steep-stepped roof engineered to shed the heavy snows of this wild new world. Those graceful Dutch gables, stepped, scrolled, and crowned with finials, became the city's first architectural signature. A handful of those early structures still survive today, quietly witnessing 4 centuries of ambition. Peter married a strong-willed Dutchwoman named Anna de Vries, and together they founded a dynasty whose descendants would quite literally build New York. By 1664, the English had seized the colony and renamed it New York, yet the von Rensselaer bloodline endured. Peter's grandson, Johannes, stood on the waterfront in 1776 as British forces set the city ablaze during the Revolutionary War. Over 500 wooden buildings vanished in flames. Out of the ashes rose the elegant Georgian style, stately brick facades, paneled doors with fanlights, and restrained classical detailing that spoke of order, reason, and the new American Republic. Johannes helped rebuild Fraunces Tavern on Pearl Street, the very place where General George Washington would later bid farewell to his officers in 1783. Its Flemish bond brickwork and gambrel roof still stand today, a living symbol of resilience. Johannes secretly carved his name into a hidden roof beam that remains behind the plaster even now, a quiet handshake across time. The 19th century exploded with possibility. Peter's great-great-grandson, Elias von Rensselaer, had become a master mason by the time the Commissioner's Plan of 1811 carved Manhattan into its legendary grid, 12 avenues running north to south, 155 streets east to west. A city for commerce, the planners declared, and Elias agreed as he laid the brown sandstone foundations for endless rows of townhouses marching uptown like disciplined soldiers. Then came the Great Fire of 1835. On a bitterly cold December night, a warehouse blaze leapt from roof to roof, devouring 700 buildings in the financial district in a single night. Elias stood on a rooftop with a bucket in his hand, watching his own workshop collapse in a roar of sparks. The city learned its lesson forever. Wood was banished. Brick and stone became law. Out of the ruins rose the Greek Revival style, stately columns, pediments, and marble steps that proclaimed New York's classical ambitions. Federal Hall on Wall Street, rebuilt in 1842, became such a monument, its broad steps worn smooth by presidents, protesters, and ordinary citizens for nearly 2 centuries. Elias's daughter Clara married into the Harper family, another line of builders and stonecutters, and their son Thomas Harper witnessed the golden age of the brownstone. From the 1850s through the 1880s, reddish-brown sandstone from Connecticut quarries was shipped down the Hudson by the ton. Thomas laid thousands of those blocks himself, crafting Italianate cornices dripping with ornamental brackets, Gothic pointed arches, and whimsical Queen Anne turrets for the growing middle class. Walk any street in Brooklyn Heights, Upper West Side, or Park Slope today, and you still feel his handiwork. Grand stoops rising like theatrical stages, tall parlor windows glowing with the warm light of gas lamps, the very texture of New York domestic life. Yet beneath the elegance lay hardship. Tens of thousands of Irish, German, and Italian immigrants poured into the city, crowded into 5- and 6-story tenements with no light, no air, and shared privies in the backyards. Thomas's own cousin perished in one of those fire-trap buildings, and the tragedy drove him to become an early advocate for housing reform, helping push through new building codes that would eventually reshape entire neighborhoods. By the 1870s, New York was bursting upward. The invention of Elisha Otis's safety elevator and the sudden availability of cheap Bessemer steel beams unlocked the sky itself. Thomas's grandson, Samuel Harper, apprenticed under the legendary Richard Morris Hunt and helped erect the Dakota, that fairy tale apartment palace on Central Park West, completed in 1884. Its German Renaissance turrets, ornate dormers, and lavish interior courtyards were built for the newly rich who wished to live like European nobility without crossing the Atlantic. Samuel also watched Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux transform 843 acres of rocky swamp and shanty towns into Central Park, the first great urban park in America. He stood on the newly opened Brooklyn Bridge in 1883, its twin neo-Gothic towers soaring 276 feet above the East River, and felt the city's pulse quicken with possibility. The true skyscraper age dawned at the turn of the 20th century. Samuel's son, Daniel Harper, joined the firm of Daniel Burnham and helped design the Flatiron Building in 1902. That 22-story terracotta-clad wedge at the intersection of Broadway and Fifth Avenue looked like the prow of a great ship slicing through the wind. New Yorkers instantly dubbed it the world's most photographed building, and Daniel kept a dog-eared postcard of it on his drafting table until the day he died. The Flatiron proved that height could be graceful rather than merely tall. Daniel also worked on Cass Gilbert's Woolworth Building, the 792-foot Cathedral of Commerce, completed in 1913. F.W. Woolworth paid for the entire $13.5 million structure in cash because he refused to borrow a single dollar. Its soaring Gothic spire, illuminated at night like a beacon, held the title of world's tallest building until the Chrysler rose. The 1920s roared with jazz, bootleg liquor, and architectural rivalry. Daniel's nephew, Edward Harper, found himself in the middle of the greatest skyscraper race America had ever seen. Two titans raced to build the world's tallest structure. On one side stood William Van Allen, designing the Chrysler Building for automobile magnate Walter Chrysler. On the other, H. Craig Severance raced to finish 40 Wall Street for the Bank of Manhattan. Edward, working as Van Allen's assistant, knew the secret. Hidden inside the Chrysler's steel frame was a 185-foot stainless steel spire being assembled in pieces on the 65th floor. On October 23, 1929, just days before the stock market crashed, the spire was hoisted through the roof in a single afternoon and riveted into place. The Chrysler soared to 1,046 feet, beating 40 Wall Street by 119 feet. Edward stood on the observation deck that very evening, champagne glass in hand, watching the city lights flicker on like stars brought down to earth. The Chrysler's Art Deco crown, radiator cap gargoyles, hubcap friezes, and lavish triangular windows became an instant global icon, a love letter to the machine age. But the race was not over. 1 year later, in the depths of the Great Depression, the Empire State Building opened its doors. Shreve, Lamb, and Harmon had designed a 1,250-foot Art Deco tower that rose in an astonishing 410 days. Edward's younger brother, Henry Harper, worked on the steel crew. They riveted 57,480 tons of steel in place, sometimes completing an entire floor in a single day. On May 1, 1931, President Herbert Hoover pressed a button in Washington, D.C. to light the building's crown. Henry rode the elevator to the 86th floor observatory and gazed out over a city still reeling from breadlines and bank failures. Yet the Empire State stood as living proof that New York refused to kneel. Its distinctive setbacks, mandated by the 1916 zoning resolution after the monstrous Equitable Building had plunged Lower Manhattan into permanent shadow, created the stepped wedding cake silhouette that defined the skyline for generations. The family's architectural bloodline flowed onward through the mid-century. Henry's daughter, Eleanor Harper, trained at Columbia University and became one of the first women to work at Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. She helped design the Lever House on Park Avenue in 1952, a sleek glass and steel box that introduced the international style to New York. Its open plaza and floating upper floors were revolutionary. Critics called it a knife blade slicing the sky. Eleanor also stood shoulder to shoulder with preservationists when the original Pennsylvania station, McKen, Mead, and White's magnificent Beaux Arts masterpiece, was demolished in 1963 to make way for the brutalist Madison Square Garden. The public outcry was so fierce that the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission was created in 1965. Eleanor stood amid the ruins of the old station's soaring waiting hall, tears in her eyes, and vowed never again to let beauty be sacrificed to profit. Thanks in large part to her generation's activism, Grand Central Terminal, the Chrysler Building, the Dakota, and hundreds of other treasures were saved from the wrecking ball. The late 20th century brought new trials and triumphs. Eleanor's son, Michael Harper, was a young architect when Minoru Yamasaki's austere 1,368-foot Twin Towers of the World Trade Center opened in 1973. They became worldwide symbols of American economic power, until the unimaginable horror of September 11, 2001. Michael lost close friends and colleagues that day. He watched the towers collapse from the roof of his Brooklyn apartment and felt the city's heart shatter. Yet within weeks, he joined the team tasked with rebuilding Lower Manhattan. The new One World Trade Center, designed by David Childs of Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, and completed in 2014, rises 1,776 feet, symbolizing the year of American independence.
Its faceted glass skin catches the sun like a diamond, and its base is engineered to withstand any future attack. Michael helped design the memorial pools where the old towers once stood, water cascading endlessly into two vast voids that will never be filled. On the building's opening day, he placed a small brass plaque inside the core, engraved with the names of every harper who had ever lifted a hammer or drawn a line in New York. It simply read, "We built this city once, we will build it again." Today, Michael's daughter Sophia Harper stands where this story began, on the windswept tip of Manhattan. At 32, she is already a partner at a leading firm designing the next generation of supertalls. Hudson Yards, the High Line elevated park, the new towers along the waterfront, and the shimmering glass spires of Billionaires Row are her canvas. She walks past the old Dutch gables that still peek out between glass giants, past the brownstones her great-great-grandfather laid with his own hands, past the Chrysler's radiant crown and the Empire State Building's steadfast spire. In her pocket, she carries Peter Van Rensselaer's original carpenter's rule, passed down through 16 generations. The wood is worn smooth by centuries of use, yet the markings remain perfectly true. Sophia knows the astonishing truth that binds every era together. Every architectural style that ever graced the skyline, Dutch colonial, Georgian, federal, Greek revival, Gothic revival, Beaux Arts, Art Deco, International, Brutalist, and today's parametric curves of glass and steel, was born from the same restless hunger. The hunger to rise higher, to shelter more lives, to declare to the world that New York is not merely a place, but a promise kept against all odds. Fires could not stop it. Depressions could not break it. Terror could not silence it. The city has always rebuilt, always reinvented, always reached for the impossible. From the modest gabled houses of 1626 to the 1,776-foot symbol of resilience completed in 2014, every brick, every beam, every rivet carries the DNA of the men and women who refuse to accept limits. The story of New York's architecture is the story of America itself. Immigrant grit, capitalist ambition, artistic daring, and democratic hope carved into the very bones of the metropolis. And as the sun climbs higher this morning, painting the steel and glass in liquid gold, Sophia Harper smiles. She can almost hear the voices of her ancestors: Peter, Johannes, Elias, Thomas, Samuel, Daniel, Edward, Henry, Eleanor, Michael, whispering on the wind. Keep building. The story is not finished. It never will be. The skyline answers back in majestic silence, a cathedral of human ambition that stretches from the salt marshes of 1626 to the cloud-piercing spires of tomorrow. This is the history of architecture in New York City. Not cold dates and blueprints, but a living, breathing, astonishing tale of courage, vision, and love for a city that never stops reaching for the sky. Every time you walk these streets, every time you tilt your head back and marvel at a tower that touches the clouds, you are stepping inside the greatest story America has ever told. And so our story ends where it began, on the ever-changing shores of Manhattan. Now, before we say goodbye, I turn to all of you, our American friends. What kind of story would you like next? Perhaps the hidden history of Chicago's skyscrapers, the architectural wonders of the American West, the birth of modern Los Angeles, or something entirely different, maybe the epic of space-age innovation, or the untold tale of small-town American craftsmanship. Whatever it is, be sure to comment below and let us know so we can bring it to life for you. To every one of you across the United States, Whether you're listening from the heart of Manhattan, the sun-drenched streets of California, the historic neighborhoods of Boston, or the wide-open skies of Texas, we wish you safe travels, bold dreams, unbreakable spirit, and the courage to build something beautiful in your own corner of this great nation. May your own skylines, literal or metaphorical, always rise higher than you ever imagined possible. Until next time, keep looking up.